most trusted name in news.
Our breaking news as President Trump heads to a rally at the border in El Paso, Texas. Congressional negotiations will be meeting in the next hour to try to make a last-minute deal to avoid another government shutdown. Let's bring in our correspondents, reporters, analysts to assess this standoff. And Abby Phillip, the president's had weeks to make his case about the need for a border wall. It looks like it's coming down to the crunch one more time. He's going to be giving a big rally speech tonight. What do you think?
I'm not sure this speech tonight is really about changing anyone's minds about what's happening here. The president has actually made it very clear that his strategy in terms of talking about the wall is about giving himself more options, what he called setting the table for the option that I think in some ways he prefers and others prefer, which is a national emergency. But otherwise, this trip to El Paso is about pressing the case against Democrats, trying to edge in maybe a bit of a political win before this whole thing is over. I mean, the polls really show that the American public did not support the shutdown for the wall. They don't support a wall by and large. And the president's views on this haven't really changed the overall public. In fact, it's just made this issue more polarized, much more difficult to solve. And I think tonight we'll just see President Trump at a campaign rally getting feedback from his people, not so much changing people's minds who are watching.
First political campaign rally of this new year. So, and he loves these rallies, as we all know. What's your read, Crystal, is on the state of the negotiations right now?
Sure. Before he left, he told the White House pool, that's up to the Democrats. He was asked, is there going to be a shutdown or not? So I think this is to Abby's point. We're already a little bit in the political blame game stage of this. I continue to struggle with it's sort of a two-part question. Part one, will they find a way to make some sort of deal that can pass Congress? I think that there's a real possibility there. Part two, does he sign it? I think the working assumption over the last week or so was, well, he'll sign it because, I mean, he doesn't want a national emergency or really a government shutdown. Neither are great options. I just keep going back to, I know he says a lot of contradictory things, but let's remember, right after they formed this conference committee that's designed to solve this, he called it a big waste of time. Those are his words, not mine. So maybe he just reverses course and signs it if they come up with something that's moderately good. Mitch McConnell comes to him and says, we absolutely have to have you on this. But people should know it is a two-step here. It is not, even if it passes Congress, it now goes to him, and he is unpredictable whether you like him or hate him. And he said things on both sides of this in terms of what he was.
If he goes beyond a really hard tonight on a border wall, is it going to make the negotiators' life even more complicated than it already is with only a few days left?
Well, look, I mean, the record speaks for itself. Republicans had 2 years to get this border wall funding when they controlled Washington. We didn't get it, right? So when it comes down to what the president will ultimately decide, it could very well be a matter of what benefits him short term versus what the party, the Republican Party, says may set a precedent. And of course, this goes back to the emergency funding. The president may view this as a quick fix. There are some Republicans, Lindsey Graham in particular, who say this is what should be done to avoid a government shutdown. But of course, you have Republican leadership overall saying this should be avoided at all costs, because think about what could happen down the line if we start setting a precedent now. The president does remember what happened to his poll numbers during the last shutdown. It cost the government $11 billion. Another one could have another lasting impact, could impact millions of Americans and hundreds of thousands of workers again, and also the IRS. Remember, they're waiting for their tax returns as well. So I do think this may be becoming more of a battle amongst Republicans within the party itself over what the president does. Of course, everyone does want to avoid another shutdown.
Yeah, the Republicans don't want another government shutdown either. You know, Laura Jarrett, the president isn't ruling out declaring a national emergency and to use funds already appropriated for other reasons to build the wall. He tweeted this, and he's quoting Congressman Tom McClintock. President is on sound legal ground to declare a national emergency. There have been 58 national emergencies declared since the law was enacted in 1976, and 31 right now that are currently active. So this is hardly unprecedented. He says sound legal ground. How sound is this legal ground?
Well, that's the thing. There haven't been 58 national emergencies in a situation like this where it would be clearly against the will of Congress. Congress controls the purse strings, and I think that's why over the past several weeks, He has not done this. We've heard time and time again, as Bianna mentioned, Republican leadership is not universally on board with this. Namely, Mitch McConnell has privately behind the scenes cautioned not to do this. Senator Cornyn has cautioned not to do this. They've all come on our air saying, I think we should pump the brakes on this. And so he can go ahead and do it, but it's immediately going to get challenged in court. But that's a legal issue. And maybe for him, this is a political battle. And so if he does do it, he's shown his base. He's strong. He's not giving in to Democrats. And so if it gets tied up in the courts, he can say, well, it's some judge's fault.
And if he's choosing, oh, go ahead.
There is a feeling among a lot of Republicans that they just really want a way out. They want something that lets them get this off their plate, even if they don't like the national emergency. I know McConnell really doesn't. There are many members who are talking to the White House saying, look, we can't do another shutdown. This might be our best option. And you know what? If the wall doesn't get built, then so be it. At least we never caved on this issue.
Yeah, they know, I was going to make that point just to add one thing to it. They know what goes down the road of a government shutdown. The party in power gets blamed. It looks like they can't run even the most basic affairs of government. Poll numbers drop. To Laura's point, down the road of national emergency, it clearly creates, for precedent's sake, if the president can just take any money he wants and allocate it as he sees fit without Congress's influence, obviously that's a dangerous precedent, but that's a let's say 50,000 foot, 50 years from now conversation of what it will mean, as opposed to the here and now in a government shutdown. Mitch McConnell has said over and over again, I don't want one. I've never wanted one. They just endured the longest one in American history. The idea they're going to endure another one 2 weeks later.
One thing to just be looking out for tonight, the president's going to be in an environment where he's getting a lot of feedback from his base, but he's also going to be talking to Laura Ingraham, who was very critical of him in the ending of the last shutdown. So this is a really potentially dangerous time for lawmakers, because you don't know what the president's going to decide after being pushed and pressured by his base tonight. These are the kinds of times where you could see really dramatic swings in what he intends to do, whether he might sign any kind of compromise that come out of this bill or not.
The clock is clearly ticking. You know, it's interesting, Bianna, I'm going to put it up on the screen. We got a graphic showing violent crime levels in El Paso, Texas. That's where the president is going to be speaking at this rally later tonight. He's been making some false claims that the violence in that city really went down once the border wall was constructed there, the fence that they have. It's a pretty elaborate fence around El Paso, Texas. But if you take a look at the crime levels in El Paso, even before the border wall was constructed, the levels were really going down dramatically.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just not true, and the facts speak for themselves. El Paso is one of the safest border cities in the country, and you don't have to listen to Beto O'Rourke to get that feedback. You can listen to Republicans, like Will Hurd, as well, also from Texas, the only Republican to represent the largest amount of a border area, and he's argued the same thing, that when you are talking about immigrants who are coming into this country, the problem lies in when they come in through legal ports of entry, and that the border is not an issue. So this is clearly something that both Republicans and Democrats are raising, and the fact that the president continues to tweet and talk about facts that just don't play out is frustrating. But at the same time, he's got a big base, a big constituency that will follow him wherever he goes, and so we'll probably continue to hear more of the same tonight.
All right, everybody stand by. We've got much more on the breaking news. We're back with our reporters and our analysts and Laura Jarrett. Michael Cohen, the president's longtime lawyer and fixer, now once again postponing, this is the third time, congressional testimony. He's supposed to appear before the Senate Intelligence Committee tomorrow. He's now explaining that he's got to pull out, citing post-surgery medical needs. He did have some surgery on his shoulder. 3 different postponements, 3 different explanations why.
Well, I mean, in this case, you can imagine if you're going to be going to prison on March 7th, or 6th, rather, you might want to have surgery before. I mean, I think that is a legitimate concern. We know that he has had some shoulder issues. But senators really only have so much time, considering they could try to get him once he's already in prison for tax evasion for 3 years, but they don't want to go through that. So they want to try to get him before he goes in on March 6th. Obviously, as you mentioned, there's 3 different committees that want him. But it's interesting, though, for the House Intelligence Committee, they said that they were delaying it in the best interest of the investigation.
The Mueller investigation.
Of course, what investigation other than the Mueller investigation? Yeah. That's a little bit different than surgery.
Crystal, listen to Senator Elizabeth Warren. She's officially running for president of the United States, saying this over the weekend about the president of the United States. Listen to this.
By the time we get to 2020, Donald Trump may not even be president. In fact, he may not even be a free person.
I mean, what she's doing, you hear the crowd going bananas, and that's why she says it. I don't think, and I defer to Laura on these matters, but I don't think there's a significant likelihood that Donald Trump is incarcerated in 1 year's time or in 18 months' time. I don't really see how that could happen, even if you believe that the Mueller investigation will find that he committed these crimes. We now know from a variety of sources that the Department of Justice does not believe you can indict a sitting president. So, again, I'm probably going further down this line than Elizabeth Warren meant to. I think she threw it out there because it's a campaign line. I do think it does make clear that for a big section of the Democratic Party base, there's really nothing you can say that's too far as it regards Donald Trump. I mean, you could say, and I'll be the one to put him in prison. That would also get a big applause line.
Yeah, I mean, I think Democrats are very much, the Democratic base right now is fired up about the idea that Mueller is going to have something on President Trump that is significant enough to put him in legal jeopardy. Many of them want him to be in jail. But the truth is, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think he's going to go to jail by 2020. And I think Elizabeth Warren actually knows that. But at the same time, Democrats run the risk of really ginning up their base for something that is going to be a big, that might very well be a very big letdown.
And I don't.
It's not going to be quite what they're expecting.
Bianna into this. Bianna, and another significant development. Adam Schiff, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, seems to be criticizing Mueller's team for not necessarily going deeply enough in investigating the president's personal finances, including with Deutsche Bank.
Listen, I interpret it as perhaps him suggesting that he could help him along that investigation, and he may be itching to want to go down that road as well. The president has long been known to have a checkered history with Deutsche Bank. They have a love-hate relationship that goes back many decades. When no other bank would do business with the Trump organization, Deutsche Bank did loan them hundreds of millions of dollars. Deutsche Bank has also been accused of loaning money to sanctioned Russian banks, and at some point along the way was also accused of possibly funneling money from the Trump organization, their debt to Russian banks as well. They were raided last year by prosecutors in Germany tied to the Panama Papers. At the same time, though, the financial crisis in 2008, when the president owed the bank $640 million, he decided to sue them for $3 billion, blaming the bank for causing the financial crisis. So they have a long, tangled history that I'm sure Congressman Schiff would love to help Mueller investigate.
And let's not forget, Laura, that American banks were reluctant to lend the Trump organization money.
Well, sure. I mean, the whole worry was that he wasn't going to pay them back. That was always the concern with any lending institution. But to the Elizabeth Warren point, can I just say, I think that this is such dangerous ground for Democrats because they have no idea what's in the Mueller report. They have no idea how this will all play out. As everyone has said, DOJ's position is you cannot indict a sitting president, let alone put him on trial, put him in jail. And if they set this bar so high and Mueller doesn't come through for them, what are they going to do about it?
Well, and by the way, just very quickly, context. Let's remember the famous/infamous Donald Trump rally chant of "lock her up" over what? We're getting into that same territory. Maybe Donald Trump has done something wrong. Maybe it's illegal, but no way Elizabeth Warren knows that.
It also speaks to the polarization in the country, right? You have the president's base that would stand with him, as he said, if he shot somebody on Fifth Avenue. And you're increasingly seeing another base on the other side that could stand with their candidates, saying that no matter what the president is or isn't accused of, we don't think that he's worthy of being in office.
Everybody stick around. There's more news we're following, including some jail